ideas? Don't you find that new ideas develop when you can talk about them with other people? If you can't discuss them freely because there is a correct view, you soon cease to have new ideas.
We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is The Morning Moment. We're on weekdays, 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. This is one of two pieces that I want to highlight. This is the first one. It comes from Anne-Marie Waters. I'm going to play this clip in its entirety. Why? Because I think it's important that you get it in context rather than just a clip. In it, you will hear her response to a recent attack on the mosque in New Zealand. A response, as you will hear, she was rather reluctant to give, understandably being in the UK, because of her well-known stance on Islam. But the reason I want you to hear this is because she is so eloquently expressing and links it to freedom of women in the West versus elsewhere in the world. And she questions, quite rightly, I believe, why women in the West see the need to support a religion she believes actually inhibits, at best, their freedoms. And some might actually say those very freedoms, they left those Islamic countries so they could experience the freedoms only to, in fact, they haven't actually escaped at all. Also, she explains, as best she can, because really it makes no sense to most people, why Britain is subjecting its people to a two-tier justice system. And then I will come back after this piece and tell you about a rather different piece, but it all has a common thread. Here's that first piece. The links, as usual, will be on my site.
I wasn't going to say any more about this than I already have, but I've received an email which has persuaded me to change my mind. There are things that need to be said about this, and they're uncomfortable things, and as so often, For Britain will be the ones to say these uncomfortable things. I'm speaking about the terror attack in New Zealand recently, or more specifically, the reaction to the terror attack in New Zealand recently. You'll of course know that 50 people were murdered in a terror attack against a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. Any decent person condemns this, I certainly do. What I wanted to mention, though, was not the attack itself, but the aftermath of the attack, and the extraordinary things that have happened in the aftermath of this attack. One of them is that the Prime Minister of New Zealand has donned a hijab, and several women in New Zealand have done the same thing, including New Zealand police, female police, who were patrolling and serving wearing hijabs. This they are calling a show of solidarity with Muslims and to provide reassurance to Muslims that they are part of New Zealand society. Meanwhile, women in Iran and elsewhere are arrested, jailed and tortured for taking off the hijab. Now, when this is happening, and Western society, and this is hardly the first time that Western women have put on a hijab to show solidarity with Muslims, who are they actually showing solidarity to? When in Islamic states around the world women are tortured and killed for taking off the hijab, if you put it on, aren't you actually showing solidarity with the people doing the torturing and the imprisoning of women and not with women themselves? Where is the show of solidarity with Iranian women? Where are the women, Muslim and non-Muslim, taking off the hijab to show real solidarity with people who are really oppressed? Putting on the hijab in this way is obscene. It is a message to all those women living in the imprisonment, in the open prison that are Islamic states, who are forced to wear this thing, and when they take it off, they are arrested and tortured. Where is the solidarity with them? This is the aftermath of the New Zealand atrocity, is yet another example of Islamization, and it is happening no matter who attacks who. So the response to New Zealand has been very similar to the response of, say, Manchester. We have a few choices of jihadi terror attacks against non-Muslims to choose from, but let's choose Manchester and make the comparison. After the Manchester attack, the priority was Islamophobia. We must provide reassurance to Muslims. Mosques were protected. Senior police went to mosques to take pictures holding the Quran. All of it was about a potential backlash against Muslims. It was all about protecting Islam, and there was certainly no investigation into the ideology driving these killers. It was all Islam, Islam, Islam. Now, in the wake of the New Zealand attack, where Muslims were this time attacked by non-Muslims, the response is exactly the same. It's all about Islamophobia. It's all about making Muslims feel reassured. It's all about sending police patrols, as we did here in the UK, to mosques to make sure Muslims are not afraid. So the response when there is a jihad attack by Muslims on non-Muslims is the same as the response when Muslims are attacked by non-Muslims. The priority is always protecting Muslims, making them feel reassured, and even more importantly than that, not focusing on Islam, making sure nobody blames Islam. The differences in the Manchester case and the New Zealand case are that there's no flippant let's move on, don't look back in anger. Now, after New Zealand, after Manchester, we were told to don't overinflate the threat, don't exaggerate the danger. These are just a few lone wolf terrorists. There's no particular ideology driving them. They're probably even mentally ill. None of that in New Zealand. In New Zealand, his ideology is being picked apart. And wouldn't you know, people who agree with him on facts, because they are facts, and that's why we agree, because they're facts, just to make that clear, are being blamed for inspiring this atrocity. Very same reaction in terms of protecting Islam, completely different reaction in terms of how we respond to the murderer in each case. I've been told that, I've heard many times, that Islamization is a conspiracy. It's not actually happening. Our societies are not actually changing to accommodate Islam. I would ask you then, if you believe this, to have a look at our legal system. Have a look at the two-tier society we live in terms of the police and indeed the court system. Muslims get away with things that other people simply wouldn't get away with it. And they get away with it because their religion and their culture is used as a buffer to protect them. They get away with horrific crimes against young girls, for example, in terms of FGM or forced marriage or child marriage. They get away with serving or forcing halal meat on absolutely everyone. And if you dare to criticize, if you dare to say a negative word, you will be smeared as a racist. Your speech will be reduced and limited. And guess what? In response to Manchester and in response to New Zealand, there was further and more argument for shutting down criticism of Islam. Because those of us who tell the truth about difficult aspects, that's putting it mildly, of the Islamic faith are now inspiring murderers, it seems. Whether or not what we say is true is irrelevant. This atrocity, as well as others, will be used to silence our criticism of Islam. And that is already happening. You can see that Sadiq Khan, for example, wants the Tory party to deal with Islamophobia. Islamophobia is the real problem here. Saeed Awarsi is doing the same, demanding that the Tories do something to crack down on anti-Islam rhetoric inside the party. They will not rest until we're not allowed to say a single negative word. And when we're not allowed to say a word against it, then we have to accept its dominion over us. How else can we fight back if not with our words? But if we really want to blame people for these atrocities, the killers themselves are the first people to blame. But the politicians and the media, yes, they do share a part of the blame for this, but not in the way that they think. It's not stirring up Islamophobia that's causing this. It's censorship on Islam that's causing this. People will become more and more angry the more you shut them down. You censors, you politicians who tell us it's hate speech to express what we know to be true, you are the ones causing this friction. You are the ones causing this division. You are allowing Muslims to trample all over law and order, to trample all over free speech. And then when atrocities occur, which many of us warned of as well, if this continues, there will be tit-for-tat atrocities and we'll find ourselves in the midst of a civil war. We're warning of this and it's happening. The politicians politicians who allowed this mass immigration against the wishes of the people, who silenced those who objected and smeared them as racists, who continue to use atrocities to further silence people and further condemn them for racism. You are the problem here. You should have listened to people when they said they were uncomfortable with this. You should have listened, and you should listen now, because it hasn't gone away. People are concerned about mass immigration, and they are concerned about Islam. You better start listening, or this will go on and on and on. We have a right to express our discontent with the current situation regarding Islam. We have a right to speak out against halal and other atrocities associated with this religion. We have every right. And if you continue to silence people, anger will continue to bubble.
Well, there you have it. Now I want to talk about the second part of her comment. To me, this is a prime example of how speech, notice I said speech, not free speech, is being manipulated in the UK. You will hear in this next piece the unbelievable hoops placed on just one individual who wanted to debate with a Muslim on campus the merits or lack thereof of Islam. The restrictions placed on an individual, mind you, not an organisation or a broadcast organisation, that this university campus placed on this one individual who disagreed with Islam. The obstacles placed in his way are in fact indicative of the British government at all levels having capitulated totally and utterly to political correctness. No wonder Brits live in fear of that knock on the door. That's not an exaggeration. That's a fact. Tell me how this is any different from Nazi Germany, where Jews feared that 2 a.m. knock, or when they were walking down the street and someone pointed out them to the authorities of the day and shouted, "Jew, Jew." You can easily today, in many Western countries, regrettably, replace that awful cry from history with hate speech, hate speech. Here's that piece. Links on my site.
I mentioned at the start of this that I had an email to persuade me to mention Islamization of our society and to show you that it is real. It is not some conspiracy theory. 1400 years of conquest of previously Christian or certainly non-Muslim societies by Muslims, turning them into Islamic societies. 1400 years of history of conquering is not a conspiracy theory, nor is the Muslim Brotherhood's promise to infiltrate Western society and destroy it from within, using our own hand, in other words, using our anti-racism laws, our anti-discrimination laws, our religious freedom laws. That's not a conspiracy theory either, and that's exactly what people see happening. But I've had an email from a university student who got into a debate at a freshers' fair about Islam and about aspects of Islam that he found objectionable. This became a discussion, and the two parties to this discussion agreed it would be a good idea to have a debate on campus surrounding these issues. He then attempted to set up this debate and was summoned to a meeting with the Equality and Diversity Officer and the university's chaplain to explain himself. He was told to, first of all, that if there was any debate, it would have to involve Christianity as well as Islam, because Christianity, presumably, is every bit as answerable to criticism as Islam is, as in other words, Christianity is every bit as bad as Islam is, seems to be the implication. So if we're going to talk about Islam, we have to talk about Christianity as well. There would be a specific number of questions, and what those questions were about was going to be decided beforehand. And as many people, as many viewpoints, of course, as possible were going to be involved. They also questioned him on his views on Islam, and when he put forward facts and the horrific aspects of Islam that he objected to, like child marriage, stoning, etc., he was told that all the problem that he had with the Quran and the Hadith were all taken out of context, and that Islam or Muhammad shouldn't be judged by today's standards. When he pointed out that Islamic states actually implement the horrific aspects of Islam today, he was told, matter-of-factly, that this is not about religion, this is about power. So can you tell me any other philosophy, ideology, religion that if you expressed any disagreement with, you would be summoned to a committee to explain your views and be told what your correct thinking ought to be. This was a university student summoned to have his thinking corrected. This is Islamization. This is Islam. This is Islamic dominance. And we have got to face it, confront it, fight it, oppose it with every piece of energy we have. We have got to stop this thing swallowing up our free Britain and leaving a nightmare for future generations. This isn't some minor issue that can be swept under the carpet. This will transform our society forever unless we stop it. Fight back now. It's not hate, it's love of this country, love of liberty, and love of who we are, and we want to preserve it. Stop this now. This is huge. It's not going away, and coming out of the European Union isn't going to stop it either. We need to face this, confront it, fight back, and fight back now. Join us. For Britain will fight back. Join us. Help us to do so.
You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab and email. We're also on Spotify. Just go to the podcast section and type Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass on these links. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com under A Radio. That's EHRADIO, A Radio, and click on the like button. And you can hear a review of our morning moments on WHBJ-DB, News, Talk, Radio on Spreaker.com. Join us and many others. And you can find all our podcasts and morning moments at aradio.wordpress.com. Click on the Morning Moments tab.